the office know folks that are seeing it being hung up all over the country and here in Austin, Texas. And it's getting people to start questioning, to start thinking about the New World Order. It's getting people to start looking into, resistance to the police state. It's getting folks to understand there's real solidarity going on out there dealing with the New World Order, and that there is a threat to our freedoms outside of the pap and garbage put out on national television. We are selling a V for Victory T-shirt that'll help get the word out and also support our broadcast. They're very popular. We're going to have them for a limited time. They're available at Infowars.com. It says V, you are the resistance. Very handsome shirts. We also have the Draft Ron Paul 2012 shirts to get that going. All available at Infowars.com. On the online video bookstore shopping cart, you can also call toll-free to get it, and that's 888-253-3139, 888-253-3139. And we're also doing the #1 Google search term today, and that's Obama, kill, switch, 3 words. Going back to Max Keiser. Max, you were starting to get into the Cairo situation, and headline, former managing director of Goldman Sachs, Egyptians, Greeks, Tunisians protest against the pillaging of their economies. And it goes on to report here that the Goldman Sachs head of the International Analytics Group, Bear Stearns, is reporting that this is being caused by the big central banks driving down the value of the dollar and hence making it harder for Egyptians to buy food.
Yeah, well, the price of food in Cairo is rising, and people only have 2 or 3 days left of food, and the crisis really becomes one of starvation. And this is playing out all over North America. And the reason the price of food is going higher is not because demand suddenly increased by 100% in the last year or two. That's not the case at all. The reason the prices are moving up is because the supply of easy money, the supply of cheap money, as a direct consequence of what happened in 2008. We talked about it. When Hank Paulson went in front of Congress, they got $750 billion. That $750 billion, it ended up being circulated not in the U.S. economy, because if it did, we would have seen job growth and we would have seen real estate prices moving higher, but we haven't. So where did it go? It went into the speculative global speculators' pockets who are using it to bid up the price of agricultural products like food. And as a result, the people who authorized that huge check back in 2008 have a direct relationship on this starvation crisis happening all across northern Africa, and it also has a direct bearing on the catastrophe in the economies of Ireland and Greece. So it's becoming a global problem because all of those trillions that were printed up at gunpoint in 2008 as part of the heist that was conducted in Congress this is the result now of it. 2 years later, it's causing food prices to hit all-time new highs, which is causing revolts, rebellion, starvation, and it's a global, what I call the global insurrection, is now occurring. So the people in Cairo and Egypt have common cause with the people in Athens and the people in Dublin, who have common cause now with anyone in the U.S. Anyone in the U.S. who feels like they're getting the short end of the stick, you are in the same boat as the people in Cairo and the people in Egypt and the people in Dublin and Athens. It's a global problem, and it's the same global bankers, the same elite bankers are causing this. And their interests are quite obvious. When they make speculative bets on these agricultural prices, driving them to incredible highs, they make money. What happens if they make a mistake? Well, if they make a mistake, they go to the government and get more bailouts.
But it's more than that, Max. We've gotten internal documents over the years. They plan for making profits on the way up, and then on the implosion, when everything goes down to pennies on the dollar or the pound or the SDR, buying things up. I mean, here's the headline, and it's up at prisonplanet.com. Former managing director of Goldman Sachs, Egyptians, Greeks, Tunisians, and British are all protesting against pillaging of their economies. Let me read part of this. Nomi Prinz, former managing director of Goldman Sachs and the head of the International Analytics Group at Bear Stearns in London, notes that the Egyptian people are rebelling against being pillaged by giant international banks and their own governments as much as anything else. She also points out that the Greek, British, Tunisian, and other protesters are all in the same boat. And this is her quote: "The ongoing demonstrations in Egypt are as much, if not more, about the mass deterioration of economic conditions and the harsh result of years of financial degradations that the political ideology that some of the media seems more focused on." And they go on to break down how IMF World Bank policies are causing what's happening there. And so the issue here is we have this unnatural event where these aren't bankers that hold your money. They call themselves bankers. These are con artists who can create any amount of currency or credit they want, and then they use that unfair trade advantage to take over all of society. And again, it's brazen, it's a fraud, and these greedy creatures have to be dealt with, period.
The phrase currency war, as it's used, is just that. The U.S. is printing trillions to go into these economies to disrupt them as a form of neo-colonialism. They are looking to control these economies, and they're looking to take property from these economies. For example, Ireland has natural resources. They've got energy resources. They've got $20 billion in cash on the books. The IMF is bankrupt, but they're putting up the assets of Ireland as collateral to raise money to go and buy Ireland, and then they'll sell off some assets and keep the rest. So it's a leveraged raid. It's a hostile raid of a country by an international organization, the IMF. Ireland itself is fine. They have plenty of cash to go for 2 or 3 more years to work out their problems. But the IMF decided that they're going to get Moody's and these other rating agencies who work with them to downgrade the bonds suddenly,
yes,
so that there's a huge crisis in the bond market. Then they come in with a package of loans that they themselves collateralize by the assets of the country that they're taking over.
And by the way, Max,
the IMF itself is bankrupt. They have no money. And before I jump in here, Nomi Prinz, she was just on my show talking about Facebook and Goldman Sachs. I just sent you a link to a video. It's 3.5 minutes. It just came out on the web 30 minutes ago. It's hot. You got to play it because she's brilliant, and she gets into this Facebook Goldman Sachs scam. People have got to hear this. I just sent it to Matt, but Matt is out in the parking lot or something. You got to get him back inside.
So no, they've been scrambling to get it for 10 minutes since you told them, and certainly we'll play that going into overdrive. So your television show airs on coming up here in a few days. This hasn't even been seen yet. But
this show won't air until tomorrow. This is a clip that.
Wow, we're getting a hot exclusive. Well, I tell you what,
a hot exclusive, exactly.
Well, we appreciate that, Max.
I agree with everything she just said. I mean, we're on the same page here. The problems in Cairo, Egypt, and in Europe are the result of banker abuse, as we've been saying for a few years. And the U.S. is slow to react because the U.S. dollar is still the world reserve currency, which means the U.S. can write checks it never cashes, which means that the price of oil and the price of food, relatively speaking, are cheap. People can still go to Walmart for $5 and, get a taco and a gallon of gas. But that's changing because the overall flood of this money, especially if they go to a $100 trillion bailout of the globe, that means prices that means currency collapse or roll up into the new currency.
And then that's going to devalue very quickly. I mean, all of this is telescoping down now where they're just rolling it over into new instruments, but it's still trying to take on the weight of the derivatives they've created.
Exactly. And once they roll it into this new instrument, and you make a good point here, once they roll it and they'll say, well, your purchasing power is the same, but you lose your sovereignty, then the next 100 trillion or 200 trillion is easy to do because you don't have to answer to anybody but yourself. And then you have the hyperinflation, then you have the currency collapse, then you have the casino gulag, then you have what we've been talking about. And it's happening in real time. We're no longer on the edge. We're now entering Cairo, Egypt, Dublin, Athens. This is happening right now. The U.S. is the last to go because it's got the world reserve currency, but once that changes, as I've said on your show many times, it's not inflation or deflation. It's the new currency, global currency, and even Jim Rickards, who was at Davos and tweeting from Davos, or very close contacts in Davos, the word in Davos is not inflation or deflation. It's recapitalization using a new global facility.
All right. Tell us about this former Goldman Sachs director that you interviewed.
Nomi Prince?
Yes, that we're about to premiere here, and why this is so important.
Well, on our show, we've talked about the casino gulag and the emergence of this new virtual currency. And, of course, Facebook's a huge player. Facebook just said that they're going to demand everyone who does business on their site in the gaming space, including things like Farmville and all the other games that use virtual currencies, have to all consolidate into one master virtual Facebook currency, which will then be convertible into U.S. dollars. So you work on 15 hours a day growing virtual vegetables on Farmville to get 15 billion Facebook credits that are convertible
and
into
you predicted this 2 years ago, and now they've got a Goldman Sachs deal. I mean, you really know what's going on inside their brains.
Sure, because I worked there, and I worked in the virtual credit and space, and I have in technology, as you point out. They invented a lot of the technology that goes into this. So I know this space very, very well. And you have a company like Zynga, which does the virtual currency. It's worth many billions of dollars. Facebook's worth $50 billion. So anyway, Goldman Sachs just put a huge investment into Facebook, and they said this company's worth $50 billion. Now, as part of that deal, Goldman Sachs blatantly broke SEC rules. And this is the subject of what I brought up with Nomi Prince in the clip that you're about to play, talking about the brazenness of Goldman breaking the law and the track record of Goldman breaking the law. And you should play it because it's an excellent clip.
We'll go ahead and play that clip right now. Here it is, Max Keiser with his guest, former managing director at Goldman Sachs.
Talking about a fraud-esque like moment that's happening in the present, and this is the Goldman Sachs Facebook deal. Why is it worse than the crappy CDOs that Goldman was admittedly selling, referring back to what we were just talking about? Fill us in on this latest scandal.
All of this is a spin on the investment bank knowing more than what it is letting on to the investors and trading on the back of that, or being able to trade on the back of it, and so therefore being able to profit on the back of withholding information. And to a large extent, the Facebook deal was like that. It's a private deal, so it doesn't fully fall under the same public purview and rules as insider trading per se. But what Goldman basically did was raise a lot of capital, and they just went offshore to raise this capital because of the scrutiny that was put on this deal in the United States. I like to think also by some of the articles I and others were writing. And they didn't want to be bothered, and so they went and they raised money for this Facebook deal offshore. And the reason it's shady in that respect is because Facebook, in the course of this deal, and yes, it is private, has not really disclosed the information as to how it ticks financially. Facebook will not disclose this information until 2012, so basically 14 months after investors have succumbed into going into this deal and have worked with Goldman to raise capital to basically allow Facebook to be valued at $50 billion as opposed to the $10 billion that it was valued at just a year ago. And the way Goldman has kind of structured the deal is they put in some seed money, which is how CDOs work. CDOs always worked on the basis of the investment bank would put in some money, some hedge fund would put in some money, and that would entice other investors to follow along. You know, there was a cushion there. Someone was giving it a stamp of approval, which is sort of what's happening with this Facebook deal. Now, it's very possible that Facebook is a be-all, end-all in 2012 and 2013, when Goldman's investors are actually allowed to get out of the deal. Goldman, of course, can get out of the deal at any time, as they could with the CDO. But, you know, it's also likely or possible that that won't be the case. And the